Someone is trying to blur our vision of the effectiveness of mental health apps. I'm Lance, I consult in this space, and today I'm going to show you how the perception of mental health apps is manipulated, by who, show you the receipts, and explain why it's fake news. You are looking at the published work of Simon Goldberg. He's a professor at a major university. Mobile phone-based interventions for mental health, a systematic meta-review of 14 meta-analyses of randomized trials. Okay, let's break this down. He himself did not roll up his sleeves, get his feet wet, and directly conduct any kind of study or analysis on any healthcare provider, any mental health app, any user of mental health apps, or any therapist that uses mental health apps in adjunct to their practice. What he did is review data. He merged and crunched data from other people's work and extrapolates from that foundation. He draws direct conclusions on mental health apps from his indirect process. So his study is published online and generates headlines like this: evidence lacking in mobile mental health apps. This is one example of an actual headline masquerading as news based on his report. And this is the outcome of his work product, a headline. Here's another example of a headline from his work product. Let's face it, we skim content. We're headline readers. You glance at that headline, it looks like news. You can reasonably conclude it's the work product of someone who studied mental health apps or users of mental health apps. But that's not the case. That headline is the result of an indirect process not involving the study of mental health apps, the companies behind them, or the people that use them. That headline is the result of merging and crunching other people's numbers. And that process is a cherry picker's delight. This prompted me to learn a little bit more about this study, and I noticed it's not actually published with a mainstream source. A source like the Mayo Clinic, PubMed, the British Medical Journal, the Journal of American Medical Association, Medscape, Health.gov. No, this is published by something called PLOS Digital Health. PLOS Digital is legit. Their aim is to provide an open access alternative to the mainstream. However, at the end of the day, I would characterize them to be a marketing advertising agency that's science-based for anyone who wants to speak on matters science and is trying to assimilate the look and feel of the mainstream. They do have standards, and one is payment, money. And by the looks of it, you could see their price list right there. Mr. Goldberg paid a little over $2,500 to have his work published on this platform. PLOS Digital has full disclosure, and they even published their acceptance letter to Mr. Goldberg. There you can see that top arrow says decision letter, and his work has been deemed scientifically suitable. And at the bottom, that arrow at the bottom, you can see they let him know to expect an invoice will be forthcoming. Here's an example of why I characterize PLOS Digital to be a marketing PR agency. Those top arrows you see there, those are tabs pointing to the metrics of exposure when they publish a work product for someone. They outline the news outlets, the blogs, the tweets, and the Facebook mentions connected with what they've published. Those green arrows on the left, for example, they show you there have been 2 mentions of this work product on Facebook. So this is a dashboard of performance online. This is exactly what PR agencies provide clients, marketing agencies provide clients. When a website or news site does pick up his work product, it's possible they can reach out to Mr. Goldberg for further questions, and he will occasionally make comments. And here's an example of that. An article published. I'll leave a link in the description of this article. And here you see Mr. Goldberg say, "If you ask me, my personal opinion From reading the literature, I think there's fairly strong evidence actually that these apps on average offer small to moderate benefit relative to nothing. I'm not making this up. Those are Mr. Goldberg's actual words. And when I first read them, I thought, is he a politician? Because he is giving lip service to something without actually saying anything. Okay, to be fair to Mr. Goldberg, this is probably a phone interview, but nonetheless, I can't understand why he can't give a clear, definitive response, and why the parsing of words, the searching for something to say. It's that word salad response that prompted me to wonder, who is Mr. Goldberg? So I dug a little bit and see he's published some work on what he calls the therapist effect. And he has a vested interest in the characteristics of therapists in determining what makes effective therapists effective. Which is all to suggest, in my opinion, he approached this with a vested bias toward the traditional framework, face-to-face framework of the patient-therapist engagement. Okay, let me share with you how this study does not reflect the real world. Mental health apps, it's a big ocean out there in terms of how they function. Some are text only, some text and video, some text video with biometric censoring. Some are used daily, some monthly. The person on the other end might be an active listener with no training, or could possibly be a psychiatrist able to prescribe medication. Some involve one-on-one engagement, some group engagement. Some intentionally don't have continuity and regular meetings. It's not a flat earth, and this report by Mr. Goldberg tries to flatten the earth and use the broad brush of mental health apps. And let me make this next observation. There is a dramatic difference in the comfort level and use of apps across generations. This report makes no distinction of any kind of baby boomers versus Generation X versus Generation Y and Generation Z. This report does not account for this reality and would have different results if it segmented the use by generations. This report assumes app users behave as a monolith, which is ridiculous. And there's lots of study out there on the variances of the use of apps, the comfort level of using apps across and segmented by generation. Okay, and one final point, and this is the most egregious illustration of how this report completely doesn't understand the mental health app industry. Mr. Goldberg's report segments effectiveness based on treatment of health conditions. So, for example, he'll break down anxiety or depression and so forth. He assumes it's a one-size-fits-all business space with the healthcare provider, meaning Talkspace or BetterHelp or Calm can serve the market adequately. And that's a major misunderstanding on his part. Not everyone is going to be comfortable with Talkspace or BetterHelp or Calm. And in the delivery of the service, it may not be effective for that very reason. This space is like shoes, and Talkspace or BetterHelp might not fit. So the results in this kind of a study more so may reflect a misalignment, a healthcare provider or app that does not fit. Let me give you an example. The mental health care, self-care app Shine was created by women of color, for women of color who did not see themselves reflected in Talkspace or BetterHelp or Calm. Conduct a study of the people that use the Shine app to manage anxiety, and you're going to get an enormously favorable result on the effectiveness of mental health apps, and a very different headline. This business space is in its infancy, and when it comes to mental health apps, you have to find your home. Where do you feel comfortable? What app do you feel understands how you move in this world and what you go through in this world? That's more than half the battle, and there's a lot of misalignment out there with users and providers right now. People form impressions and weigh effectiveness based on their experience with BetterHelp or Calm. And maybe they're a first responder, a cop, a fireman, an EMS person, and might find themselves more reflected in the Cortico Guardian mental wellness app, tailored to first responders. There's something called Crew Care, another first responder mental wellness app. When you consider a mental health care app, you really need to look for signs and wonder, how woke is this app to my issues? Whatever is unique about me, what I encounter as I move in this world, due to my sex, due to my ethnicity, due to my profession. If you're a teacher and not too fulfilled by the big box apps, Talkspace, BetterHelp, Calm, etc., maybe you should explore the Jabu Mind app, a mental health app for teachers. Mr. Goldberg's study doesn't reflect this, the critical importance of having alignment and not assuming there's alignment. People, more than half the people using Talkspace at this very moment, might not feel comfortable there for whatever reason. They can be misaligned and don't know their options or haven't explored their options. Mr. Goldberg would do himself well if he really looked into the Shine app, why it emerged, and perhaps conduct a study on how satisfied the users of the Shine app are in terms of how helpful the app is in managing their anxiety or depression or whatever health condition he is interested in. At the end of the day, Mr. Goldberg's study can reflect nothing more than broad misalignment coupled with his ability to cherry pick, blur, obscure, and omit to achieve a headline. What you see here is Mr. Goldberg effectively manufactured what is fake news. And what's going to be interesting is to see how he uses this as agency to further something else. I anticipate this is going to be a building block for speaking engagements, perhaps another paper. Who knows? It would be very easy for me to furnish ample studies directly refuting what Mr. Goldberg is saying, but that's for another day. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, share it with a friend. If this is the kind of thing that interests you, definitely subscribe. I'm Lance. This is Therapy Grind. Until next time, take care.